name is Charlotte. I'm a senior manager with Strong Cities Network, and it's my pleasure to serve as today's host for this side event, which we co-organize with generous support from the European Union. We're delighted to welcome you here today in what I hope will be a dynamic session on the role of cities in preventing and countering violent extremism, including in the implementation of the UN Global Counter-Terrorism strategy. Before I hand over for us to hear a little bit from the city perspective, I want to give a little bit of brief background about Strong Cities Network. Some of you know us, some of you don't, but just to give a little bit of context as to how that we came to be here with you today. So to sum us up in one line, Strong Cities Network is a global network, an independent global network of more than 175 cities focused on catalyzing and really supporting more city-led efforts to prevent and counter violent extremism and related challenges. When we say cities, we use the term as a catch-all. We mean all types of local governments, rural, urban, megacities, capital cities, border towns, etc. And we do work with all these types of local governments. To give you a little bit of a sense as to the diversity of our network, recent new members include Cape Town in South Africa, Nansana in Uganda, Al June in Jordan, Sarajevo in Bosnia, and our most recent member stateside is Hoboken. The beautiful city of New York is also a member, and we're delighted to have a representative from the city with us here today. We were launched in 2015 at the UN General Assembly and with support from the US State Department, and we're joined by Mike Duffin from the State Department here today. And we were launched really in recognition of the vital but overlooked role that cities play in preventing hate and extremist-motivated violence and terrorism, particularly in addressing the conditions that might lead to violent escalations. Since then, we've supported cities across the world with elevating their role through, among others, bringing them together for city-to-city learning, and that's really, really core and foundational to our mission. Facilitating national-local dialogues to ensure local voices both inform national counterterrorism, counter-violent extremism strategies, and also just to improve vertical cooperation in this space. We recently did this in Uganda, for example, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs has now committed to ensuring local governments are at the table in discussions about implementing their national strategy. We also host multi-actor roundtables to, facilitate complementarity instead of duplication between different prevention efforts at the local, national, and multilateral levels. I was just mentioning to some colleagues, we just did this in Baghdad in Iraq, where we had, alongside the EU advisory mission to Iraq and the National Committee for Countering Violent Extremism, we hosted governorates, cities, civil society, different national government agencies, and international partners like UNDP and IOM, just to have a two-day informal discussion around how that all of these different efforts at these different levels can be streamlined, essentially to maximize impact and sustainability. And finally, we support cities with technical expertise and resources to enable them to localize and then actually apply some of the good practices that you've heard throughout this week and elsewhere. Above all our work is demand-driven, and we're really, really committed to ensuring that our work is informed and guided by the needs of cities. So we do regular mappings, consultations with mayors and other city officials to understand their needs instead of us making assumptions about their needs. Just very briefly, in terms of why cities, as you all know, cities have kind of proximity to and contextual understanding of local communities, and they already deliver such important public and local services that can be leveraged for the prevention of these issues, whether that relates to housing, employment, education, etc. They're also at the forefront of response when there are escalations to violence. But despite that, they remain largely overlooked in the kind of national and global prevention space. So we work with cities to help them meet that potential, understanding that it is really at the local level that manifestations of extremism, violent extremism, terrorism, that it's at the local level that it plays out most explicitly, and that cities play a multifaceted role in preventing these threats from taking root in the first place. Like what the UN Global Counter-Terrorism strategy says, for example, about preventing conditions conducive to terrorism. In terms of what we actually do, just to give a bit more of a sense, of utmost importance to us, as I said earlier, is really facilitating city-to-city learning. We are a network of cities, after all. So we offer mayors and city officials a platform to share and learn from each other on a range of topics related to addressing hate and extremist motivated violence. For example, we just hosted a fascinating roundtable in Cape Town, which was co-hosted by the City of Cape Town at City Hall for South African cities, in which the City of Cape Town was able to share its learnings from being the first city in the country to really develop a city-led framework for preventing violent extremism. And that roundtable offered other cities from Johannesburg to Pretoria, Buffalo City, Overstrand, Stellenbosch, and others the opportunity to learn from that experience as they look to develop similar frameworks. Another commitment to the city-to-city learning side of things is our Transatlantic Dialogue Initiative, where we bring cities from North America together with European cities to strengthen cooperation in preventing violent extremism. We actually just concluded a 3-day program in Berlin with support from the US State Department and US Embassy Berlin, for example, where cities were able to learn from each other on really pressing issues like rehabilitation and reintegration of foreign fighters. The city of Berlin does really fascinating stuff in that space, and how to mitigate extremist-motivated anti-migrant violence amidst ever-increasing numbers of displaced peoples. And we actually conducted a poll while we were in Berlin, asking cities there to let us know what they think the real emerging threats are within their local communities. And out of about 9 options that we gave them, the top 3 were mis and disinformation, white supremacy and right-wing extremism, and third, anti-migrant violence. So we know that these are really pressing issues, and we'll look to use that insight as we continue our transatlantic dialogues. And those were cities ranging from Edmonton in Canada to LA was there, Aurora, Colorado, Berlin, of course, was present, smaller German cities, Polish cities, and those were the top 3 threats by far out of the 8 that we listed. Very quickly as well, what we also try to do is actually elevate these city practices. As I said, City of Berlin is doing quite amazing stuff in the context of rehabilitation and reintegration of foreign fighters and their families, and we try to share those practices so that other cities can learn. And finally, we provide cities with tools. We're actually currently developing 3 tools that will launch in September, which include a guide for the implementation of the Global Counterterrorism Forum's 13 Good Practices for National Local Cooperation in Preventing and Countering Violent Extremism, which we're doing with support from the Australian Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade. And that is a space that we're doing more and more in the national local cooperation space because it's been identified as such a need. Cities want to work with their national governments in this area. They want to be able to inform the strategies. They want to be supported to then actually localize and implement national strategies. And then the 2 other guides we're working on, one is for mayors on what local leadership might look like in this space, and the other is for local governments more broadly on how that they can enhance and sustain that city role in prevention. And I guess the final kind of area, or our final commitment to really elevating the role of cities, is making sure that their voices are heard, not just on the national level, as we've mentioned, but also internationally on the global stage. And it is in this context that we are here today, again, with generous support from the European Union. So with all that said, I want to express my gratitude to the European Union for supporting us to be here today and for their continued support to Strong Cities, including through our Strive Cities initiative, which helps scale our work in MENA and East and Southern Africa. And of course, thank you to the US State Department, who are also here and who have also been long-term supporters of Strong Cities Network. Before we pass on to our cities, I'm going to now pass on to Mike Duffin for a brief overview.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I want to express my gratitude to the Strong Cities Network and the European Union for organizing this event. One of the reasons Strong Cities Network remains as relevant today as it was at its launch at the UN General Assembly 8 years ago is because mayors and other local government leaders around the world are eager to play their part in preventing and countering violent extremism, PCVE. Through workshops, summits, and exchanges, Strong Cities Network has engaged local leaders across 6 continents on their role in implementing the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. The formal and informal discussions held at these events have also led policymakers and practitioners to develop inclusive and equitable PCVE programs based on the best practices and lessons learned of their fellow member cities. the important role cities play and other local governments play in promoting whole of government and whole of society approaches to the PCVE efforts is why the U.S. Department of State helped launch Strong Cities Network back in 2015, and it's why we've continued our support. The threats, because the network is threat agnostic, whatever the threat of the day is, that's something that basically the way the network's been designed allows it to evolve, and the fact that the original 25 members included cities in Peru, in Colombia, in Africa. It's been a very diverse discussion from the very start, and while certain threats may dominate the discussion today, that doesn't mean that it has to going forward, because we are seeing an evolving threat landscape. We're grateful for the contributions other donors have made to the Strong Cities Network, particularly the EU supported the Strive Cities Network, as Charlotte mentioned, across the MENA region and East and Southern Africa. While members are eager to attend Strong City Network events, many often lack the budget to fund international travel. This is why it's important to bring new donors from the public and private sectors into the fold. With over 175 members, there's significant demand for local government leaders to share best practices and lessons learned on PCVE with each other on a global, regional, and sub-regional level, as well as capacity building for local governments across the global south dealing with significant threats from Islamist terrorism. And just to reiterate, a network that created 8 years ago had 25 cities, and it was difficult to bring everyone together in one place for the inaugural global summit in Antalya, Turkey in 2016. Imagine the interest of local leaders who want to attend the global summit in New York in September. It's just there's a lot of demand, and it's important that we work with the donor community to find a way to support these local government leaders. With the rise of racially or ethnically motivated violent extremism, or what we call REMV, the State Department and other donors have supported a series of transatlantic dialogues, as Charlotte mentioned, to bring local government leaders from Europe and North America together. These discussions, which have been held in Berlin, Denver, The Hague, Helsinki, Oslo, and Washington, have highlighted the important and unique role mayors and other local government leaders play in countering the hate and polarization, which contributes to the life cycle of radicalization to violence. Strong Cities Network has been a critical partner in engaging local governments on countering REMV across Central and Eastern Europe. In October 2021, Strong Cities partnered with a Slovak NGO to organize the first ever Strong Cities event in Slovakia. This event was followed up by a regional conference in Bratislava in November 2022, which came just weeks after a REMV-motivated gunman murdered 2 members of Slovakia's LGBTQI+ community at a bar only a few blocks from that venue. Over the next year, we plan to support additional transatlantic dialogues, including in Bratislava and other cities in Central and Eastern Europe, with a focus on building the resilience of communities hosting refugees from Ukraine. The work is critical, particularly as REMVs, the Kremlin, and other malign actors attempt to spread disinformation about refugees who have escaped Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. Before I conclude, I want to repeat my call for other governments and the private sector to join the State Department and the EU in supporting Strong Cities. There's no other network like it for local policymakers and practitioners to discuss their role in PCVE. And most of the members have joined Strong Cities because they've experienced at least one act of violent extremism in their community. Some have faced multiple attacks from violent extremists across the ideological spectrum. This network's demonstrated enormous potential in its first 8 years, but it needs more resources to meet increasing demand. And we hope to see as many cities around the world in New York in September. Thank you again for allowing me to speak at this event.
Of course, thank you. And thank you for mentioning our upcoming Global Summit, which I will tell you a little bit more about before we close the session later. But in brief, it's a very exciting 3-day program we have on the margins of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly this coming September, where we're bringing over 70 mayors and 70 local government practitioners from across our global network for them to be able to learn from each other in this space when it comes to city-led solutions to preventing violent extremism, but also how cities have responded when there have been escalations to violence. And we've seen amazing examples of that in Oslo. We just had a transatlantic conference there as well, where the mayor of Manchester was able to meet with the mayor of Oslo. We had the mayor of Highland Park in the US, where they last July suffered a July 4th parade mass shooting almost a year ago. And they were all able to come together and learn from each other about how that they support their cities in the aftermath of violence, especially, when you think long term. So that's a very exciting program that we can share a little bit more about later. I'm now going to pass on to Marcus Lutz from the European Union for a couple of remarks on.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, my apologies for joining you late. I was held up in a meeting with our ambassador. I would like to thank the Strong Cities Network on behalf of the EU for leading on the organization of this event. It's the European Union's pleasure to partner with the network on this event that brings together such a diverse group of stakeholders and engaged participants on preventing and countering violent extremism worldwide. As you know, the EU is committed to a holistic approach to combat the emerging threat posed by violent extremism, hate, radicalization, and polarization in society. To this end, we will hear of achievements today within one of the projects we fund, strengthening resilience to violent extremism in cities, or short, Strive Cities. The project started in 2022 and highlights best practices and lessons learned on engaging local authorities across Eastern and Southern Africa and the MENA region specifically. We are proud to fund this flagship PCVE action. Strive Cities is an example among many of our long-standing good partnership with civil society and NGOs on such initiatives globally. We seek to heighten contributions that mayors and local authorities can make so that we better understand and address the hate and extremist-related threats that local communities in these regions are facing. Violent extremism is a common challenge across all society stakeholders. For this reason, it remains a key issue on the global security agenda. The EU contributes to fighting this threat through the 4 pillars defined in our counterterrorism agenda: anticipate, prevent, protect, and respond. The EU spends an increasing budget every year on counterterrorism and PCVE activities in third countries. As of 2021, our funding amounted to 450 million euros. 31% of those funds were specifically dedicated to the prevent pillar. Our efforts have long recognized the so-called security development nexus. Many parts of the world cannot fully benefit from development assistance because of the insecurity that violent extremists cause. That is why, over the last decades, the EU has invested heavily in projects that strengthen the resilience of communities to violent extremism around the world in partnership with local organizations. Our efforts are in line with the major international policy frameworks, strategies, and approaches to PCVE, including the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy, which was just updated yesterday. I'm sure many of you know that, and the UN Plan of Action to Prevent Violent Extremism. Arguably, violent extremism requires a discourse that is more nuanced than the traditional approach to counterterrorism. Instead of relying only on hard security measures, it needs a more considerate and agile response. Key international community actors have recognized the growing relevance of cities in preventing and countering violent extremism. They are often the first to respond. They have a comparative advantage in preventing violent extremism from taking root in their communities and in countering it when it has taken root. The whole of society approach to PCVE is also widely reflected in UN multilateral frameworks. Strive Cities seeks to bring coherence between local needs and national, regional, or international PCVE strategies and efforts. The starting level is cities and establishing a trust relationship with the local community. Indeed, the EU's PCVE programming follows a number of general principles. First, be evidence-based and help develop further knowledge on the topic. Second, be adapted to the local context. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to violent extremism. Third, do not harm and maximize good. We do not want to exacerbate divisions between communities or worsen existing grievances while we still strive for impact. And fourth, a whole-of-society approach. We want to involve a wide range of actors beyond traditional law enforcement and security actors, from civil society and public institutions to businesses and leading figures within local communities. The Strive Cities project looks to precisely act on this need. It aims to strengthen the role of cities in prevention, including elevating their voices in national and international PCVE discussions. Concretely, the EU supports efforts to build the capacity of cities to lead and sustain prevention initiatives, enhance national-local cooperation on prevention, and connect cities with a multilateral PCVE landscape. Our event this afternoon offers a unique opportunity for different types of stakeholders to discuss, network, and promote a balanced implementation of their respective plans towards the goal of preventing violent extremism. It will be particularly useful to hear from our panelists on their efforts and experiences on the ground. In order to succeed in our fight against violent extremism, knowledge, skill, sensitivity, and determination are required. With that in mind, on behalf of the EU, I would like to thank the Strong Cities Network and Charlotte for organizing this event, for their valuable work. And let me also seize this opportunity to thank our panelists and our EU colleagues on the ground and at headquarters in Brussels who have assisted the successful implementation of activities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just to add on the Strive Cities program that we run with support, such generous support from the European Union. It's because of the Strive Cities program, because of the EU support that we were able to do those activities I mentioned in Uganda that has now resulted in the national government carving out spaces for local governments to inform how they actually implement their national strategy. It's because of that support that we were able to host that event in Cape Town and other events like that, like the event that I mentioned in Baghdad as well, where now all of these actors are committed to working together in this space. So very grateful for that. Thank you so much. Now to pass on to our panel, we have an exciting lineup and are joined by Edward Flynn, the UN Counter-Terrorism Committee Executive Director, Marco Meesters from the city of Amsterdam, John Kwoba from Busia in Kenya, and Hassan Navid from the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes in New York City. I have to add, we were also supposed to be joined by Asha Omar, who serves as an advisor to the mayor of Mogadishu, as well as the mayor of Amman in Jordan, but where we have done a lot of work. But unfortunately, it was too difficult to secure their visas on time, but we are channeling them in this panel. And as I said earlier, they and dozens of other mayors from these other regions that we work in, East and Southern Africa, the MENA region, West Africa, will join us here in September. So we really look forward to that. But now I'll pass on to Edward. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Charlotte. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored by the invitation from the Strong Cities Network to open this panel discussion this afternoon. My remarks will not be long because I think it is important to give ample time to the distinguished city representatives whom you have invited to this event during Counterterrorism Week. But I would like to shed a little light on how the international community's approach to countering terrorism and violent extremism has evolved over the years since the 9/11 terrorist attacks, and how it is evolving still, and why the work of the Strong Cities Network is so relevant in that regard. I guess I have a pretty good perspective on this matter since I've been deeply involved on this issue for practically that entire time. At the beginning, shortly after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the focus of the international community was captured by four often repeated words that were inspired by Security Council Resolution 1373, bringing terrorists to justice. We were concerned chiefly with accountability, with apprehending and prosecuting suspects, and international cooperation, criminal cooperation. This initial emphasis is, of course, quite understandable. Since those years, however, there has been a very gradual trend in the direction of placing greater emphasis on prevention and on promoting greater community involvement in efforts to prevent terrorism and violent extremism. And I'm proud that we at CTED played, I believe, a significant role in that gradual adjustment in focus. We primarily used an early but important resolution, Security Council Resolution 1624 of 2005, which addressed the specific issue of terrorist incitement. That is, the messages of supporters of terrorism urging people to commit acts of terrorist violence. Resolution 1624 called on states to criminalize and prosecute acts of incitement, and this is, of course, important. It also called upon states to ensure that their counter-incitement measures were respectful of the right to freedom of expression. But the Counterterrorism Committee and CTED went beyond the mere question of criminal arrests and prosecutions to target incitement in its work on Resolution 1624. We also relied on important language in the resolution that called on states to work on prevention of incitement, to work to promote dialogue and understanding among civilizations, and to engage more actively with civil and religious society, the business community, educational institutions, and other non-governmental actors. And this was quite a remarkable position for the Security Council to take, but it was really important, and it's something that we seized upon. And so we worked in many regions of the world with the financial support of several like-minded states to promote greater dialogue between governments and communities on how to not only prosecute terrorist inciters, but also to counter the violent extremist ideologies that lay underneath the phenomenon of incitement. And I'm happy to say that it appears that this work played a crucial role in the rise in the following years of the concepts of countering violent extremism, or CVE, and PVE, of which I happen to be a very strong supporter. The essential idea behind these concepts has been that in order to make genuine progress in addressing these threats of terrorism and violent extremism, it is essential to promote a whole-of-society approach and to encourage dialogue between government policymakers and the communities that are on the front line, so to speak, as potential targets of attacks by terrorists. It was essential, it was believed, to benefit from the insights that these communities could provide, both regarding the underlying causes of violence and useful strategies for preventing it. I believe that this commitment to dialogue and to prevention continues to grow, which I think is a hugely positive trend. Many of us noted that the UN Secretary General stressed the central importance of prevention in his speech opening CT Week on Monday. Of course, criminal law enforcement remains of core importance, although it must be added, today we are unfortunately seeing criminal law enforcement relating to terrorism often being aimed at human rights defenders and at members of nonviolent political opposition groups. This is not what counterterrorism is supposed to look like, and it is not helpful to effectively countering real terrorist threats. But we are also seeing much more of a commitment to dynamic engagement with local communities in this field. Just this past Wednesday, for example, it was very inspiring at another side event to learn of the good work of Kenya and Kyrgyzstan in this respect as those countries work on implementation of their national CT and CVE strategies. And that's one reason I'm so grateful that, Mayor Kwoba is here from Kenya today. And of course, we're also seeing this commitment very strongly reflected in the extremely valuable contribution of the Strong Cities Network. In my view, the work of the Strong Cities Network really represents the cutting edge of new and innovative programming to effectively confront the threats of terrorism and violent extremism in the 2020s. Our best hope lies in promoting real dialogue between governments and local communities and in uncovering the power that can be found in creating these partnerships between governments and non-governmental actors, and rejecting the view that sees independent civil society and local actors as enemies. The fact is, all decent members of society are united in their opposition to terrorist violence. The most promising way forward lies in working and communicating together. So I will close with that, and I look forward to hearing from the other members of the panel. Thank you very much. Charlotte, back to you.
Thank you so much. I think that's a very helpful context, a very helpful background into how that we have thought about this space and how that it evolves. And so now I'm going to pass on to Marco Meesters, Deputy Head of the Department of Crises and Incident Management with the City of Amsterdam, who's going to share a little bit more just to give you practical examples of what cities are doing in this space, share a little bit more about the approach of the City of Amsterdam. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you on the Strong Cities Network and the European Union for organizing this side event and for inviting the City of Amsterdam to participate. It's a pleasure to be here and a great opportunity to exchange some thoughts and ideas on how cities can contribute to preventing and countering violent terrorism, violent extremism. And in my opinion, this contribution can be significant. But I'll come to that in a minute. Let me start by shortly introducing myself. My name is Marco Meesters. I work for the City of Amsterdam. I work for the Department of Security and Public Order, and I'm a manager on the program on prevention and countering extremism. We work on various forms of extremism, ranging from Islamic extremism, for example, the reintegration of returning fighters from Syria and Iraq, right-wing extremism, and what we call the anti-institutional extremism, which is the extremism from the narrative that there is a violent and evil elite seeking to suppress the population, which is upcoming in our city and in our country. Moreover, I'm a deputy manager of the crisis and incident team of the city, and this team is responsible for advising the mayor of Amsterdam in crisis and public order related events and incidents. Think of protests, for example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, but also in the aftermath of the murder of a famous advocate and crime journalist, riots after introduction of the curfew during the pandemic. And we work on issues such as facilitating activism and protest, guarding and securing people and buildings, preparing for a potential aftermath of a terrorist attack, and issues that are interrelated and are important for upholding constitutional rights in our democratic society. As I said earlier, I think cities can play an important role in preventing and countering violent extremism. And Charlotte, you and a couple of you mentioned some examples. One advantage is that cities have, compared to national agencies, is that their closeness to citizens and communities. And another advantage is that cities are in the right position to create multi-stakeholder cooperation between citizens, communities, local professional organizations in social and health domain, and with security agencies such as the police and intelligence offices. And I would like to talk to you about how the City of Amsterdam uses these advantages. First, we have developed, and we still continuously develop, close ties with citizens and communities. Amsterdam, you may know, is a very international city with citizens from over 178 nationalities. As a consequence, international events and tensions have a direct impact on our local society. To cope with this, we invest heavily in our ties with citizens and communities via formal and informal networks, via various civil servants, numerous talks, meetings, conferences, and these help to create a strong information position. And we combine the insights from these meetings and these discussions with intelligence from national and local security offices, information provided by professionals from the social, the health, and the educational domain, and insights from academics. Working from this information position enables us to identify risks and to take appropriate measures. However, it's important to note that we do not do this from the security perspective. That's not our main perspective. Our main perspective is that we should work together with citizens and communities from the perspective of trust and finding ways to help and support citizens and groups in creating a viable and living environment. We should not view citizens and communities as a potential security risk. These close ties can be levied also in crisis situations. In Amsterdam, we have developed a protocol, the so-called Peace Protocol. This is a protocol which is activated in crisis situations. And activating the protocol means that various civil servants start interacting with their network partners, formal as well as informal. And there are 3 goals. One is attaining information about what is going on and what needs to be done and what needs attention. 2 is leverage the local and informal opportunities for intervention. And 3, coordinate the interventions taken by various partners. Originally developed for the aftermath of a terrorist attack, the peace protocol has been used in various situations, such as a terrorist attack in another city, a nearby city in Utrecht, riots after the initiation of a curfew during the pandemic. Second, when we zoom in on how we cope with radicalization of Amsterdam citizens, we have created a strong network of partners for early identification of signs of radicalization and for early intervening. We have created a network of partners in social, health, and educational domain. Think of teachers, youth professionals, street corner workers, mental health professionals, etc. These professionals are in continuous contact with citizens and can be enabled to identify signs of starting radicalization. Moreover, they can be empowered to know what to do, to stay in contact with these people, and to help and support them where necessary. And we proactively interact with various professional organizations in our city to promote knowledge and awareness on radicalization and on trends and developments in this field. We have created a support center, a single point of contact for all professionals with questions about radicalization, extremism, and for professionals seeking assistance and advice. Third, we have developed a strong multi-actor approach on radicalized people. We have what we call a case-based approach for people that form a risk on violent extremism by pursuing violent extremist actions on their own or by influencing other people to pursue violent actions. The case-based approach is aimed at disengagement, since in a democratic society there's nothing wrong with having radical ideas about how society or government should be organized. In the case-based approach, security agencies interact with organizations from social and health domain, creating a tailor-made approach for the person involved, combining support, interventions, and setting boundaries. This process is guided by a case director, and the whole process from a person entering the approach to the exclusion of the person from the approach is rooted in a transparent protocol, so that the person in the approach knows his or her rights and duties, and so the approach is used proportionally. I could go on for some time. I could tell you about our approach to facilitating protest, a constitutional right that can work as a valve for social tensions. I could tell you about the role the city takes in including people in democratic decision-making and in promoting democracy and citizenship among young people, but I think I need to come to an end. I hope to have given you some insights in how the city of Amsterdam tries to use its position close to citizens and communities and in the middle of a large network of relevant organizations to prevent and counter violent extremism. Well, I thank you for your attention, and I look forward to answering your questions and to discuss with you about the role cities can have in this topic.
Thank you so much, Marco. We will do a Q&A open discussion after the panel ends, and I encourage everyone to ask questions. We are a smaller group, so let's make use of that and have a nice conversation after. Thank you so much for sharing. I think the city of Amsterdam really exemplifies the vital role that cities can play in serving as a coordinator of all these existing initiatives that are happening at the civil society community level. And I was also particularly interested in what you said about the protocol also being used in Utrecht. So there's a little bit of like city-to-city coordination there as well, which I'd love to touch on more, because that's, for example, the roundtable that I mentioned that we did in Cape Town with support from the European Union. We found Cape Town's prevention framework is so successful that municipalities around Cape Town are now concerned about crime displacement, where crime is being displaced to their cities, and so they're urging more collaboration with the City of Cape Town, the City of Cape Town is very eager to do as well, to be able to address that. So that's another area that I think is quite important. But now we'll hear from John Kwoba from Busia Municipality in Kenya. Kenya is a context in which we've worked for a while. It is a fascinating context, and as you were saying earlier, quite commendable, amazing work being done to kind of decentralize the approach and ensure counties and different municipalities are involved in addressing these issues areas. So I'll pass on to you, John. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. All the protocols observed. I would say I'm delighted to be here, stepping on the American land. Yeah. Because I just passed in the air when I was going to Nova Scotia for the training through Delta. I never stepped on the land. So thank you very much. We have to appreciate the role that Strong Cities Network is doing and enabling us to talk together. Earlier it has been very bureaucratic. People on the ground don't talk to the people in offices. People in offices come and force you to do what they want you to do. And then we react negatively, which now brings hate. And it's this word called hate that we want to eradicate from our terminologies in the rural cities so that you can have love and trust for everybody. Less hatred, more work, more business. Now, Busia city is in Kenya, bordering Uganda. We have got a population of 80,000 people. And every week, we have about 20 to 60,000 visitors who pass by and who do business in Busia city. Busia has got a porous border. There's one custom in Busia, there's another one in Malaba, but along, people just cross and go, cross and go. So Busia shares the name with Uganda, and it's just divided by border. And we are the same people. Kenyan government has developed a policy framework for preventing violent extremism. I hope Ambassador Kiman was here. He has been our boss at the NCTC for a long time before he became an ambassador. And he really did a very good job in terms of giving us skills and knowledge to be able to go back to the rural areas and be able to deliver something. That made me to be a champion of PCV in the county. We have at our county level what we call the County Engagement Forum. And the County Engagement Forum does not do everything that National Forum does. It has picked on some few pillars it can work on. And like me, I'm the chairman of the economic pillar at the county engagement level. We talk to people in business, we talk to people in various villages to ensure there is a lot of transparency, they create jobs for young people and have the attitude of positivity towards the young. There are a few other pillars like education, the countering, that's the security system. Because if you don't follow, they arrest you, put you in cell, take you to court. But for us, my major role is how can we prevent the recruitment. The government has very good anti-terror unit called ATPU at the police level on the local ground. And they do a very good job. Because when we inform them of there's an incident most likely to happen, they intervene very quickly. And they keep the secret of don't mention. Because when those people recruiting know that it's you, they come for you. And they're very aggressive. Now, the CSOs, the civil society organizations, have got a very active role in this one. And I'm very grateful that the European Union, the Dutch government, the Netherlands government, has done quite a lot in terms of supporting the civil societies in working on the preventive measures, giving knowledge and skills to many people. The trouble is that the numbers of those who are given are small and the population is large. But for me, I'm very happy that I'm privileged to be here and even hear from Edward, hear from Mark, hear from Mike about what you are doing. We are going to get together. We need seriously to look for how can we prevent our young men and women from joining these groups. One, we cannot just prevent, we have to go back to the family. The root cause of the problems is from the family. If we can have parents, the guardians talk to their sons and daughters, then less could go to joining these groups. Kenya has had some situations where 2 of those people who were in the terror groups were from Busia. Then I said, now, yesterday it was in Nairobi. Today it will be at home. And some of us who like meeting, the purpose for those terror groups is you go, disrupt and kill, destroy and kill. So it's most likely that when we are here, when we have got the radical teams here, they kill you and destroy everything here and say, now we have succeeded. There is no success with killing somebody. What of you? If you are killed, how do you feel? You don't feel anything because you are also gone. Now, we have some concerted efforts with the very little resources as a municipality. We have got various people from different areas. We have got people from DRC in Busia, that's the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have people from Southern Sudan, situated in Busia. We have people from Burundi in Busia. We have people from Rwanda in Busia. We have people from Tanzania. It's because Busia is a business hub. And in order for us to live with peace and harmony, we must eliminate this word called hate, introduce love, working together to generate revenue and income. Now, as a TV champion, in all meetings like the one we had in South Africa, we gained something. One, Cape Town has got a very good program for even identifying where there is a problem. I've asked my governor and my chairman, who is now the mayor, that we must have some exchange to be able to look at what they're doing so that we can be able to replicate it in Busia. Once when you are in trading and you want to move home with maybe just 10,000 shillings, that's like $1,000, and someone's ready with a gun or a machete to cut off your head, then you are not safe. But we want safety. When there is safety in our estates, then there will be more business, then more people will be employed. And this unemployment causes people to join groups which are wrong. And from our families, poverty pushes them to those groups. And just before I came, we had a meeting with some youth groups. We said, no, for us, if I can get somebody getting us money, I will just go. He said, why go? I said, because there is nothing, there's nothing. I said, yeah, you have got something. Get out and work. Generate your own and be able to survive. Even if there are hard times, good times are coming when you are generating some money. Now, as a host of these communities, we now have an influx of Indian community. It has just increased over time. The number has increased. They're having the big hardwares, the big shops. And we are saying we have to work together. You have to contribute towards prevention. Otherwise, the bad team will come to you. 2 attacks in Kenya, which saw 2 people from Busia being part and parcel. But we need some concerted efforts. One, we need you, my brother Marcos. I think we are going to, Marco, we are going to write to you. We need our governor and some members of the team to come and learn how that protocol works, that peace, because it's very important. And I'm also happy to say that in our meeting in South Africa, we teamed up as 4 cities which are cross-border: Busia, Kenya, and Busia, Uganda; Koboko, with a group from DRC and Southern Sudan; maybe with another town in DRC; Cape Town with another town in Namibia. We have come together as cross-border cities to see how do we educate our communities to be able to live in peace and harmony. Even when you're crossing the borders, you are not breaking the laws, and you are not against the other. Can we have trust in trade? Can we have an enabling environment that even the security teams looking at you will say, this one is under good practice? So I was delighted to be taken as their secretary. And now our sister Charlotte will be in trouble, because from here, a lot of writing, because we need to get to Cape Town to develop a strategic plan for those cross-border cities, so to can be able to start functioning. Others will now come in slowly, and learn from experiences. Our community needs a lot of knowledge and skills. I think we are hampered as a municipality, we are hampered as a county, we cannot move. We don't have resources. But one resource that we have had as the human capital, then from the strong cities, has enabled me and others to talk. That talk is just another capital of itself. So we are committed to that one. We have to develop the cross-border system where goods which are not wanted in Kenya or not wanted in Uganda by law are not crossing. Like we have got a lot of bang, cocaine crossing from Uganda to Kenya. And Ugandans planned, knowing we have got a market in Kenya. But when we were in the meeting in Entebbe, they said, it is not legal. But how do we fight? You are now going to fight very rich people who can come and kill you at night. So we have to be very careful in the way we approach, so that slowly with the Internal Affairs Ministry in Uganda, they are going to cut them down and also discourage those who buy in Kenya. We need to implement what we decided in South Africa, Johannesburg. That protocol, the training manual, the toolkit, we need it so that we can be able to transfer those skills to many others. Because as a porous border, we're at a very high risk, but it's not impossible. It is possible that we can be able to work together and reduce even to zero. I'd also like to say we need a training program between the American, the Dutch, people in Holland, so that as we talk about preventing, you are preventing where these young men and women are going to go. They will go when there is an opportunity of getting money. But when there is a resource where they can depend on by working on for themselves, they will not join. I'll give you an example. After working with Action Aid for a very long time, got off the work. When I was given my pension, I set up a program. I just an NGO. And now I'm very happy that I've had to get 21 engineers from the trainings we gave to them. We gave out poultry, we gave out goats, we trained them how to use oxen for plowing, we trained them in organic agriculture. Those who took it very seriously, children went to school, and now they're in good positions, they have got good education. I'm very proud of that one. And even now we have 2 doctors. Happy. And one of them is working with the Nile Basin Initiative as a program manager. And whenever he sees me, he calls me, old man, you are still surviving. Yes, I'm surviving because of their love and prayers. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the European Union. I want to thank the State Department in America. And to also thank other brothers and sisters from other countries for supporting the Strong Cities Network. Let us scale up. We have got need. We have to care for our sons and daughters. we have to talk at the family level. May God bless you all.
Thank you so much, and for sharing so candidly and for giving us such clear action points as to what we need to continue with. Just to give a little bit more context as to what our brother was saying, as I mentioned, we had our roundtable in Cape Town. 2 days after, we had a regional workshop in Johannesburg, which Brother John attended, out of which these collaborations came between Busia and Cape Town and with Koboko, and which is something we're very excited to see and which we really look forward to supporting you with. And thank you for giving us such clear recommendations as to what you need as a municipality, and for showing such amazing local leadership in this space by engaging youth proactively, by making sure they feel they have the skills to build their own future and so forth. So thank you for sharing. All right, now I will pass on to Hassan Naveed, Executive Director with the Mayor of New York City's Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Again, Hassan Naveed. I'm the Executive Director for the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes, and we are in the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. First and foremost, I hope you're all enjoying New York City if you're visiting. We welcome you to our city. Please enjoy our food, the tourism and stuff that happened. It's a great place. So this is relatively a new office, right? And we're going to go ahead and just take Office for Prevention of Hate Crimes. I'm going to boil it down to an acronym, OPHC. And so what we saw in 2019 and the years previously was an increase in hate crimes that were taking place across all categories. And it really was scary for a lot of New Yorkers, and it was scary for a lot of people across this country, right? Because in many ways, you're looking at New York City, one of the most diverse cities in this country. And the fabric of our city, which is our diversity, is being undermined and attacked. And so advocates and community organizations came together and said, the city has to take an intentional approach towards addressing this issue. And it can't just be talk, it has to be something that actually has a look to it, has an office to it. So they took this particular issue of hate itself, bias, of discrimination, and they elevated it into an office. So you can just imagine structurally what that does, right? It takes an issue and brings it right under the mayor's office itself. And the approach here was, we can't police our way out of these issues. We can't use the criminal justice system in many ways to be able to work towards prevention or response in this, but this has to be a holistic and comprehensive response. And so our office was founded primarily on pushing forward non-law enforcement responses towards addressing hate, bias, and extremism. And that really involves an important relationship with our community organizations that we fund. We were blessed to be able to also receive funding from the city itself, about $2.4 million, that we end up investing across 66 organizations that represent the immense diversity of our city. All the way from the, some of my partners are here. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a tad bit. But organizations that represent Middle Eastern communities or Arab communities in our city, Pakistani communities, Asian communities, South Asian, whatever. It's a LGBTQ community is extremely diverse. And to be able to get all of these organizations collectively to work towards prevention and response of hate crimes. I think it's also important just to mention that one size doesn't fit all. And when we work on these issues in New York City, we have to really work towards consulting with our communities to be able to get a better idea of how we can assist them. And so I'll have some of my partners shortly share what some of the efforts that they're doing on the ground that's working towards addressing hate crimes in the prevention context. At the same time, prevention is important. We are still facing a deficit, and response is something that ends up becoming an issue. It's in New York City, we know the impact that the criminal justice system has had on communities of color in this city, right? We also know what relations have really ended up becoming fraught over time with certain communities, especially after 9/11 with the NYPD surveillance program. And so the efforts of us trying to really rebuild that trust and engage with communities themselves is to meet them where they're at, and to be able to really figure out ways of how we can collectively building a trustworthy relationship, take those funds to be able to address these issues. So how do we do this? So we really rely on these 3 pillars, and I'm going to quickly just go over them, and then I want people to speak. I want the orgs to speak for themselves here, because we're so blessed to have them here. One is community, right? And community relations is a major part of our effort, and that includes our funding that's provided to these organizations that run campaigns on issues across the board. When we talk about this larger issue of community hesitation or distrust because of whatever experience that they've had, we can see it through the course of the hate crime numbers that come in. There is systemic underreporting when it comes to people filing a complaint against issues related to bias, hate, discrimination, and there are a variety of factors of that. It could be the stuff I previously mentioned, but it could also be stuff related to language access. It could be that someone may be coming from another country who thinks, well, why is it worth me reporting this? What is it really going to do for me, right? And so these factors for us to be able to address, I'm not an expert for every community. I have to turn to the very folks who work with these communities to provide consultation, but also to provide programming on the ground. And you'll hear a little bit about some of that shortly. In addition to that, we also noticed that throughout the city there were areas where there's community tension. How do we seek to be able to address community tension? Some of these are along the lines of racial lines. They could be economic lines. They could be businesses. They could be people calling various hotlines over and over and over again to complain about someone. How do we seek to be able to address those conflicts through means of civil conversation, through community mediation? And so rolling out this endeavor has been something in the next couple of months to be able to get New Yorkers to come together and have conversations through third parties to address some of these issues that are happening in neighborhoods themselves. And in some cases, as you'll know, if these issues are not resolved, they can escalate into something even worse. I should also add that although my office focuses on hate crimes, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, I also sit alongside with the office that works on gun violence prevention and the other offices that work on diversion programs around issues related to crime as well. The second thing is education. But actually, before I get there, going back to community, the mayor has been a really strong proponent in bringing New Yorkers from different communities collectively together to have conversations. We need to go beyond hi, hello, goodbye, but we're neighbors. We live with each other. We're in apartment buildings. You live down the hall. Different community, different cultures. And so the city itself has incentivized New Yorkers to be able to come together through a program called Breaking Bread Building Bonds, in which 10 New Yorkers at a table. And we've had events that go up to 100 New Yorkers, we'll put them in the 10 tables, really asking questions about something that anyone can really answer. And one of those questions that is answered quite frequently in some of these events is, when was the last time you felt uncomfortable somewhere? And you can just imagine, it's New York City, a diverse group of folks talking about their lived experiences here, where they felt uncomfortable, whether it was at the workplace, whether it was walking somewhere, really sharing and understanding that we actually share more than we do otherwise. And this initiative is something that our community partners have been working on as well, and it's been pretty popular. I will say that we launched it and we already had about 700 people ask, because people want to meet with each other, right? They want to know each other. We're a city of about 9 million New Yorkers, right? With one of the most diverse communities in the world. And you can imagine everything that we put out in terms of resources are in about 20 different languages, right? So we're an international city in many ways. So how do we best facilitate those conversations one-on-one with people to be able to build a sense of social cohesion? And so there's those that are also broader approaches, but then there's also targeted intervention, where we are finding places where there might be issues between communities and public housing, where there might be issues with communities in certain places, where we can then work towards putting that intervention forward. The next thing is education, an important key towards us being able to address the issues of hate, bias, discrimination, disinformation that comes from social media. I mean, you can just imagine the amount of stuff that's out there. And I think what you were referencing to, Marco, some of these ideas that are making their way out, these anti-institutional ideas, right? We've been working on education towards really rolling out curriculum within the schools itself that seek to address these issues of hate. We're proud to have a New York City human rights law that provides coverage, that provides protections for communities that's even more than what the federal government provides, right? We're providing protections for folks who are transgender, gender nonconforming, part of the LGBTQ community, a variety of communities across the city itself. And really having New Yorkers see that, listen, a part of our civic duty, on part of being a New Yorker, part of our responsibility as being residents of this city is to be able to maintain what makes this city great. And that's this diversity that keeps us collectively together. And that when there is an attack on one New Yorker because of who they are, or what they are, where they come from, it's an attack on the city itself. And we can't accept that whatsoever. At the same time, when we see incidents happen across the city, we saw what the anti-Asian crimes led to a tremendous issue across this city, with hundreds of incidents that were reported and even hundreds more that weren't reported, in which folks were taking out this anger of this pandemic incorrectly, wrongly upon communities themselves. And so even in those instances, we want to be able to make sure that we're providing information to people about what's exactly going on, and also where to go to for resources. Could you imagine just a young child going onto the computer and putting something in and coming across all this information that's just, and you can't distinguish between what is fact and what's not? And so we're proud to have our relationship with our partners to put out resource guides in those circumstances, right? In those targeted areas where we're seeing this stuff, to ensure that our communities know where to go, that they also know what's happening, and they can also trust these various credible messengers that we work with on a day-to-day. And last but not least, with a city of 300,000 employees, a city that functions as a small country, all the way from the schools to the trash can, all the way from the parks to the waterways, we have to ensure that our approach towards addressing these issues is consistent, it's comprehensive. And so we bring together an interagency committee collectively together. This interagency committee brings other city agencies to the table, including all of our law enforcement partners and our DAs as well, to have serious conversations about how we can address these issues through means of non-law enforcement, but also how to be able to quicken our response to this, and also engage with our community partners in being able to ensure that we are meeting the needs, right? Is one department, for example, the after-school, the Department of Youth and Community Development that provides after-school programs and education, is consistent with what's being taught in the schools themselves? Is there consistency around these sorts of issues? Among all that, the office also works alongside, and I think you said it best, was that jobs. The city of New York has a summer youth employment program that employs 100,000 youth in this city, gives them jobs during the course of the summer. And many of them are placed in some of our nonprofits, my organization, I believe in some of yours as well. And these youth are coming from places where some of them come from the public housing developments in the community itself. They're given priority, among many other. But this is an opportunity for you to be able to get money, to be able to make money, to get experience, to be able to work in government, to be able to understand the purpose of why government's important, and also why it's important for us to be able to, the work that we're doing. And so these are various aspects of our stuff. Let me see if I've covered everything here. I do want to also, because I think that I can speak to the work that we do, but I think the bread and butter and the meat of our work is coming from our providers, our credible messengers who are on the ground, who have the experience with these communities. And so I'm going to pass it along to either whoever wants to speak first.
Just say that we have 13 minutes left in the session, so yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Hassan. I want to thank Strong Cities Network for inviting me here today. My name is Marwa Janini, and I'm the Executive Director of the Arab American Association of New York, also known as AAA-NY. Our work is driven by our mission to support and empower the Arab immigrants and Arab American community across New York City. We are one of 6 anchor organizations constituting the Partners Against the Hate Forward initiative that has given us the opportunity to organize, strategize, and build cross-community solidarity in effort to combat hate. One issue we have identified is how policies, such as the Muslim ban and surveillance, fuel and reinforce Islamophobia and the othering of minority communities, given rise to an increase in hate crimes. What efforts are the agencies involved in counterterrorism putting forth to combat these consequences? Thank you.
A bit. I wanted to see Joanne. Anyone else is welcome to speak as well too. Go ahead.
Get the opportunity to be here. Just want to share a little bit about the little bit of context. My great-grandfather is the first one that migrated to New York City. And, you know, there are past problem in this country. I need to go into that, but from generation to generation to my generation, things been improving. But after, when the pandemic hit, all the stuff that we used to hear about, that I read about in books, hear from my grandfather when I was a child, it's happening in my very face, right? For the first time, I helped organize a nonprofit in South Brooklyn. We serve about 20 zip codes, about 4,000 seniors. It's the first time that in 26 years of history, that one of our seniors was actually set on fire by somebody, right? One of the church that we run our building, actually, I was standing there in a meeting and rocks were going through out the windows. So, and the thing is that these things happen not from the experience, like what is the, you know, the typical people that, you know, when I hear from my grandfather's generation, or the early generation, it's about people feeling insecure about job. These adults are committing these heinous acts. What we experience is actually children doing this. 13, 14 years old, me, you know, and it's not about jobs. But again, let's move on to the more positive side to share what we have been doing. Thanks to the support of the City of New York and Joanne and other partners. You know, I think part of the challenge is that with social media today, anything goes. So it took us a while to think about it. So what we're working on now is like, we cannot allow this to be normalized. So we want the normalization to be truth, to be what communities are about. So for example, we are now planning for the first time, not just to celebrate diversity, but to celebrate things that we all celebrate together. The beginning of summer, the end of summer. So I just have a meeting coming here with the Brooklyn Kings County District Attorney's Office to say, we are gonna celebrate. We're not gonna be there law enforcement heavy. They're there to protect us. But we are working with the Kings County District Attorney's Office to be one of the partners in Prospect Park to have a celebration call the end of summer and the beginning of school so that we can actually meet school kids. So let the different sectors do their part, but at a community level, we're gonna do our part to be part of it. So that we want social media to put out posts that about people being together rather than that. I think you know, we are not expressing our area, clearly not, and I hope someone will figure this one out with this social media getting really complete and filtered out of control. What we can do is to put our own posts, create our own events to make sure that we talk about the good thing that is New York City. So some of the examples that things they're working on. So again, thank you, appreciate the opportunity to be here and to share what we do a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Charlotte. Welcome to New York. As a New Yorker, the only thing I will ask you is please walk fast. New Yorkers get very annoyed when we get stuck behind people who walk slow. You mentioned September, and I realized, oh no, that's when all these slow walkers are going to be in our city. Yes, please tell everybody to walk fast. I want to share what Hassan mentioned about breaking bread, building bonds. So we actually hosted one. We're hosting many, my organization, the Asian American Federation. But I actually went to one because I thought as the executive director, I should actually go to an event that my staff are doing. It was really amazing. And I think these are the moments that I realized this is the work that's left to do. And I know that many of you talked about the role of nonprofit organizations, NGOs, and I wish you could all I can channel all of this to go tell all of my funders that this is the investment that needs to get made. Because we can talk about law enforcement, we can talk about a whole heck of a lot of sort of like military law enforcement responses, but the reality is that the bulk of the work that will change people's minds and keep our communities safe is being done by nonprofits. So we did one of these breaking bread dinners, and it was with Latino and Asian small business owners. Two groups, they do the exact same work, but they would never get together, and they've both faced tremendous violence. And when they got together, first of all, nobody wanted to speak, but when they got together, I didn't realize the Korean owners, because they have so many Latino workers, speak perfect Spanish. We didn't need a translator. And they talked about the shared challenges they have. And the event ran long because they exchanged cards and they had shared issues. And we thought, this is the work that we have to do, is to bring people together to be able to talk about the challenges because if you are a small business owner, you feel isolated, that some things are happening, you're afraid. But if you have allies that you can talk to about solutions, I purposely did not encourage them to lobby City Hall out of my friendship with Hassan. But I think these are the conversations that we need to have. And I think one of the things that we also work on as a group is to create a lexicon for our community, because I think part of what happened during Black Lives Matter, even with anti-Asian hate, there was this prevailing sense of this is who's attacking us. And so we had to create the language to say, well, actually, that's not what it is. For all of us, we deal with a lot of facts and numbers. And so that was the powerful moment. And so I know that we are all very deliberately working outside of just the Asian American community. But part of the work that we are doing is to lead by example by working beyond our own communities and by building this lexicon of this is how you create neighborhoods, this is how you feel safe. And so that is the work that is starting, and that is the work that will have to come for many years. Okay.
Jihef Fisher from the Korean American Family Service Center. We primarily work with immigrant survivors of gender-based violence, but because of during the pandemic, because of the anti-Asian hate crime has been increased, we've been working with these wonderful partners on the issues to amplify the voices of these hate crimes that are being happening, but also how to prevent and how we could best support our community. But I echo Joanne, Don, and everybody who spoke. It's not just the city government's responsibility. I want to again emphasize the importance of the partnership with so many different sectors to tackle these issues. I just want to say that New York City is home for so many immigrants, and each of these organizations that are represented here are linguistically, also culturally affirming services that are provided. And that's, so there's that trust that we already built. And I know we only have 4 minutes, so I won't go more, but thank you, everybody.
No, thank you so much. And I think we've just seen a perfect example of what happens when a city creates intentionality in this space through creating an office for the prevention of hate crimes. You are sending a message that it is not okay, that all New Yorkers should feel comfortable and safe within the city. And by then investing in local partners who have access to the communities that are being impacted, that just shows an amazing example of partnership. When we talk about a whole of society approach, that's what it should look like. So thank you all for coming and for sharing. We are nearly out of time. I was hoping to do some Q&A, but if you do have questions, we can maybe do one question if anyone has a burning question. Otherwise, I think Marwa had a question.
Just give me a second. Okay. So one issue we had identified is how policies such as the Muslim ban and surveillance fuel and reinforce Islamophobia and the othering of minority communities, given rise to an increase in hate crimes? What efforts are the agencies involved in counterterrorism putting forth to combat these consequences?
I'll put that out to the floor. Anyone want to jump in?
We've seen that the rhetoric around the world of politicians, whether it's on the local or national level, has a great impact on communities. So if you have a leader, a mayor or a prime minister or president who has is inclusive, welcoming, then that should trickle down. Doesn't always happen. There are going to be people who hate no matter what, but you also, when you have leaders who are stoking the flames of intolerance, then that has a great impact. And we've seen a direct correlation between acts of violence in places like Pittsburgh, the Tree of Life Synagogue, and the rhetoric, the conspiracy theories. So I would just say that promoting an inclusive, tolerant society, it doesn't solve everything, but it matters. Rhetoric, the language that leaders are using in their dialogue, the symbolism that they have, engaging communities, it does rub off. So I think that's that's important.
The normalization of some of this stuff that's going on, right? With relation to some of these crazy theories that we're hearing sometimes in these ideas itself. And it's quite interesting that in many ways, the media is also playing a part in that normalization as well, right? As well as social media. And so I think in combating that, yes, we can work towards education as being one aspect of what a solution looks like. But how deep-seated is it, right? And how far do we need to go even further to prevent that level of normalization? Because it's concerning because we're functioning within that entire system itself, where the anti-migrant sentiments that exist in this country are very, very hostile. And so I'll stop there. I think you hit it.
So hello, everyone. I don't normally sort of ask questions, but I think Marwa's question, I thought I'd just bring your attention to a landmark resolution that was passed by the UN Security Council on the 14th of June, just last week. I speak as a counter-terrorism advisor to the UAE. The UAE's been at the forefront of trying to address hate speech, racism, and acts of extremism, and this was the first resolution by a Security Council to address the question of hate speech, and it's the first one to actually highlight the problem of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, Christianophobia, and other forms of discrimination. I would highlight the resolution again, 2686, 14th of June. Have a look. It is a landmark resolution, and it will change the way the Security Council will turn its attention consistently to the issue, including a Secretary General oral report to the Security Council 2024. So Marwa, I think there are a lot of steps that are starting to positive steps that we can refer to, and the UAE with the UK have been at the forefront of trying to push that to respond to some of the issues that you and your fellow panelists have raised, and I commend you for raising it. So I just thought if that's helpful, I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the excellent question. One more question? Anyone? Gezelligheid, yeah.
Well, may I I think, or add to the answers that have been given, I think that local leaders have an enormous responsibility and a large role in this topic, and I think that mayors like cities of, well, my city, but also the city of New York, can make really strong statements when these things happen and when these things are mentioned in public debates. And well, I think the mayor of Amsterdam does that, and I think that's important.
Thank you so much. And actually, speaking of mayoral leadership in this space, I was witness, thanks to Hassan, yesterday to the mayor of New York City, really celebrating pride in the LGBT community in his city and really showing that this is a place for all New Yorkers, no matter what background, no matter how they identify. So that was really, really nice to see. All right, we are at time, unfortunately, but thank you again all so much for coming. I hope it was informative and that you had, you've heard some great examples of what cities' involvement in this space might look like. And we really look forward to this continued work with support from the European Union, with support from the US State Department. And as I said, we are doing a massive global summit in New York City in September, where we're bringing over 70 mayors and 70 local government practitioners to learn from each other, like we've been doing, as Brother John has mentioned. And we really look forward to that.